Welcome to The Memory Game, a podcast where I, Nathan Tuffin,
and I, Rob Beer, exchange voice notes as we carry out the important work of recording an emotional history of video games.
For the betterment of future generations. This week, we throw caution to the wind and break the format to record a live recap of Season 1.
I really like the idea of fading in on the discussion of how we start this. And
Okay, that's a good idea. All right.
That was the
This
start.
is it. Okay.
The start.
All right.
That's
Us
happened.
sounding confused and scared about how to transition between the different
that
format
might be
points.
the whole episode, yeah.
Yeah.
So to bring listeners in, welcome to the end of season live episode. These are going to be regular, we hope, as a way of taking a moment to look back at some of the answers that we've come across, bringing in listener bits as well, and then setting a new course as we step into the new season. So we're going to essentially look back using our patented Trash Treasure Truck format, which we'll explain when we get there. We're going to hear some questions and voice notes from listeners to try and squeeze in some of the stuff that they've been sending in. And then we're going to look ahead to season 2. But before we do any of that, we've got to obviously atone for the fact that we're calling this a history podcast, an emotional history, but we should at least try and get our facts vaguely right. So let's introduce Rob and Nath Know Nothing.
Rob and Nath Know Nothing.
They know nothing!
You should read the first one, buddy, because it's directly related to one of your various mistakes that you've made over the course of the recordings.
I was going to edit that bit out, Nath, but I quite like the way you said it. So, to get the ball rolling, I imagine Top of the Pops style music maybe over the back of this. So, B.F. Skinner, not James Skinner, worked mostly with pigeons, and the buttons in Skinner boxes, which I referenced, released bread, not cocaine. I was conflating that with the Rat Park experiments, which showed that rats in isolation showed higher dependence and use of morphine than those that were housed together in Rat Park. So that's corrections on some psychology bits that I mentioned at some point.
In listing cultural examples of playing chess with death, we failed to mention Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, excellent film, which features them beating him at Battleship, Twister and Cluedo, Clue in the US. And I think that's where I got my sort of idea about how good Death would be at games, because Bill and Ted managed to best him at some general parlor games. So yeah, that was in the first episode about playing chess against Death.
The Rosebud cheat in The Sims involved typing ! semicolon repeatedly, not one semicolon, which I couldn't decide at the moment as I was saying it which one was right, so I backed the wrong horse.
There's a video in the show notes now showing how you do it for that episode. When we read up on the Pokemon Red/Blue cheat, it appears the developers did not plan for the missing no to feature in the game, and it is an actual real-life bug that someone discovered.
One of my favourite Wikipedia pages, it's gone right up there in that list. It's the whole thing, but let's not get lost in it now. The Age of Empires creator mode was a scenario maker, not a tool for creating multiplayer maps. And I think my conceit was that it was a goal that I set myself to make a scenario, but that was the explicit goal. So it's a terrible answer, apparently. More importantly, I think I said that King Harold marched north to fight the Battle of Stamford Bridge against the Celts, but it was Harold Hardrada, who was a Viking, not a Celt. So
it's an easy mistake to make.
Yeah.
The Mortal Kombat All Fatalities on a Loop game cheat that I mentioned was in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and it didn't have any brutalities as they weren't in the game at the time, but it did include animalities, babalities, and friendships. And I started watching through the video again, and it was as upsetting as it was when I was a child.
What's babalities?
You do a little, fatality combo and then turn your opponent into a baby, and it just ends there.
Okay.
I don't know what
That's better than it could have been. Yeah.
Yeah. What are the implications for what?
The end. Like abort. No. End of conversation. This is my rifle. This is my gun. Is from the film Full Metal Jacket, which I'd like you to say again.
This is my rifle. This is my gun. This is for fighting. This is for fun. And this is for fighting, but they grab their crotch.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it's gross. So the little characters that you control in the game Narcos Cartel Wars are actually called Sicarios, not Narcos. Sicarios are the drug dealery bad guys. Narcos are the people that catch them, of course.
Yeah. You're addicted to being wrong? Come on.
Zing!
So there you go. Rob and Nath know nothing. So now I guess we move on to what we're thinking of as the sort of heart of this podcast, the heart of this episode, which is the patented trash treasure truck. Bring in the trash treasure truck.
Beep, beep, beep.
Oh boy, she's big. Which was your misreading of my idea, the trash, treasure, and tuck. So what's a answer or a game that you would treasure most from the series that we mentioned? What's one that you'd trash and destroy the memory of if you could? And what's one that you sort of failed to answer that you want to try and tuck into the series just before the lid closes on it?
It's just it's very hard to say trash, treasure, tuck, and very easy to say trash, treasure, truck.
Trash, treasure, truck.
We could, or maybe it's not. And then, but also, maybe instead of tucking the game back in, we're trucking the game back in.
Yeah. It's not like because obviously one of the things that you could level at this podcast is it's vaguely a rip-off of Films to Be Buried With.
Yeah, definitely.
And there's like slipping a DVD in the coffin lid, but that's not what we're doing. No. We're smashing through the wall of the funeral parlour. It's still a funeral parlour. It's still ripping it off a bit, but we're driving a truck straight in and then dump truck in, your answer in, flinging it over.
Big old game memory right into the funeral director's lap.
So I think that clarifies that, doesn't it? So I guess, do you want to go first? It's the order, as I say, is trash, treasure, truck. So we can start negative and think about it could be an answer that you're going to trash, or it could be the game itself that you want to trash.
Trash, treasure, truck.
I went relatively, down the line in terms of I just chose a game for each one, and we sort of talked about it's destroying the memory of the game. So I guess you get to live your life on without having been haunted by that particular thing happening.
Yeah, I thought you'd interpret it that way.
Yeah.
But without it butterfly affecting your life so that you don't meet your wife and have your children. Yeah.
But it's good that you brought that up as well, because that is one of my greatest fears. So the memory of game memory I would like to trash was playing DayZ or DayZ, which was the first-person shooter zombie survival game that I sort of got a bit addicted to after the fun had stopped. And the real reason, I think, was just I have a very visceral memory of the physical discomfort I felt afterwards, after having played it. That kind of like tense, neck hurty, sore feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess did that come up as that was it wasn't about frustration, it was about addiction. That was when that answer came up, right?
That's exactly it, buddy. Yeah, that's it. It was about sorry, go on.
And that being an answer where most of the ones we talked about being addicted to were sort of, we loved it so much we couldn't stop playing it. But your answer was entirely about its frustrating and like joyless experience.
Yeah, and it particularly spoke to your kind of criteria of playing after the fun had stopped. But I don't know that I ever had fun playing it, or maybe a little bit. I've got a couple of good stories if you think that it would fit of like experiences I had playing with my friends. But I can't remember a single experience playing on my own. And I think because it was rubbish, genuinely rubbish, just a series of sort of slow, being scared, then dying, or being just horribly mistreated by other players.
Yeah, I can imagine it being a simulator, a sort of simulation game of The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And there is something to, if you're in a group, you're sort of carrying the light for each other, aren't you? But on your own, what does any of it mean?
You mean like after you play DayZ, it tends to send people into an existential crisis, a low-level depression. Yeah, that's definitely it. What they did with the game was make it so there's no allies or enemies really. It's just all players, and you can all hurt each other and interact with each other. But when you spawn into the map, you have nothing. no items whatsoever, just clothes, I think, or maybe a bit of food. And you just have to run around getting stuff. But it means you can see people who are new, who've just been spawned in very easily. And there is no real reason to kill them.
No.
You know what I mean? There's no incentive to.
But then it's like they just appear in sort of deer-shaped form. Like they
exactly.
look like they need to be hunted. Is that it?
That's exactly it. Yeah, you've tapped into one of my stories was, I was going to say, is I always was like sickened when I was killed as a newbie. But then a couple of times playing with friends, we also ended up doing it. And it's like, what would happen is you would get a rifle or a fire axe or something, and you'd be like, oh, this is great. But the sort of good fights and interactions were so rare and so just happened so infrequently that you would end up sort of being quite itchy to use your weapons.
Yeah.
And a guy sort of came out of the woods at us and attacked us that was new, but like you can't do it. I think with your fist, you can't even really hurt anyone. And we had some, it was like me, Justin, and Jack, I think, and we had guns. Or a few bits each, and we were like, you're talking over the comms, and he's saying, "Okay, don't stop. Like, we don't want to fight you. You're it kind of took him hostage, but without actually saying that." And as we were talking to him, Justin just shot him straight in the head. There was no reason to, but it was almost like, I had to test the rifle out. I had to see if it would work on this guy. And I did the same thing a couple of times, and it was, I think it was too sort of attractive to do, but also they made it so you could do things like handcuff people, carry them around with you. You could force feed them like gone off food and make them throw up. So obviously that fed into a lot of the
talking
interactions.
About that idea of playing beyond the fun, why aren't they just quitting out? Or are you stuck playing? You can't load a different version until that character's dead? Like what?
No, you could quit out, I think. I'm sure people do. I think there are a lot of people quite committed to the role play.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I also think maybe in your mind, because also there are like occasional angels going around just giving you stuff, like nice players.
Angels? Oh, right, yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, yeah, that's
Angels
Day
A,
right
isn't it? It's Day Angel, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But there are occasional players that just they've got loads of stuff and they go around and they see a new player and they give you some food and a backpack. And I suppose maybe people that whole game, it was all about the potential of things that never happened. So people, the reason you're sticking with it, I guess, is because you think something good is going to happen, and it never does.
I mean, that's a whole, again, every story. I think this is why the podcast has to be us exchanging voice notes, because every story or anecdote in a game sends you off in so many different directions. I was just thinking there about like what have games taught you or revealed about the world around you, because it's absolutely, even as the developers, they had some intentions there of behavior they were trying to encourage, but players changed the experience. And it's like, I've been thinking about this idea recently. It came up in a book I was reading that was talking about Star Trek when it was made in the 60s and 70s, having like a optimistic view of the future. And then if you compare that with modern Star Trek, it's sort of just fallen into the well of every other sci-fi experience, which is just like broadly dystopian.
Yeah.
They look at the sort of like colonial roots or like colonial parallels between what they're doing and how colonialism played out on Earth. And it's just like, oh goodness, like you can't have anything that's bright and lightness. And that's, I suppose it's a zombie game, so they're trying to foster that, but it's also inherently in just like, well, you gave me a gun, I'm going to use it. So
well, I think some of the function of that stuff as well is, I had a time when I was playing with my friend Harry, and you could get shot and kind of incapacitated but not die. And what it meant is that, if you were playing together, someone could patch you up, give you some food, give you some water and help and, nurse you back to health. But I suppose it then put in the game the ability to feed things to people. And I think it's a bit like your, all things happening at the same time at once, all over in different places at once thing with Roller Coaster Tycoon when we were kids. Everyone was like, do you know that you can just drown people in this game? I think that all of a sudden everyone was like, I got to get Daisy. I want to feed someone some gone off cat sandwich or something and make them throw up and, or something along those lines.
That bridges really nicely to my answer for this question, which was, if I could destroy a single memory, it would be Roller Coaster Tycoon and David showing me him deleting a bridge and there being hundreds of Roller Coaster Tycoon amusement park visitors drowning. Obviously, I've seen way worse things in computer games since. I've seen worse things on news since. The world is filled with horrors. But I feel like that was I wasn't ready for any of that, and some sort of watershed moment in my life, possibly.
Well, that was
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. What struck me about that story was that it was like a little bit of a loss of innocence.
Yeah, well, at least retrospectively, that's what I put on it. But
if that were a movie like sort of Stand By Me or something like that, that would be the point at which you watched a bully like stab a frog or something, or like kill a cat.
Yeah.
and you suddenly learn
it's
about
naive
what
of
people
me
are
to
like.
think that, like, it would have just got replaced by the next thing. Maybe I would have been more disturbed by people drowning Sims characters instead. But I also think there's something to it in those early 90s pixel graphics where the ambiguity and sort of fuzziness of it adds to the horror. I think if you can watch, there's a weapon in BioShock 2, which is this harpoon gun. And if you shoot at someone blank range with it, it sticks into their body, so it can go through their head, and then their body, like ragdoll, flies across the room and sticks into the wall. And I can see that now and find that quite funny.
It is
even though it's utterly disturbing. And I think everything you do with graphics that improves things makes it slightly less horrifying in a way, because it's the sort of gaps that add some of the horror. Possibly, I don't know. I'm not sure I want to see a high-res version of that, like a 4K.
yeah. Or a kind of virtual reality version.
Yeah.
But do you think there is also maybe a thing that, I mean, I can't remember how old we would have been when that game came out, like 10 or 11 or something. But is there a chance that at that point
that's something to be Rob and Nath, I think, isn't it?
Yeah,
Rob and Nath know nothing, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. But at that point, games are maybe more of a safe space. There's probably less violence maybe that you're experiencing.
But certainly the ones we were playing.
Yeah. And that one in particular is not an inherently violent game. The concept is not supposed to be there. People aren't supposed to die in it.
Yeah.
And the idea that they can, in retrospect, why did the developers put that in there?
I wonder as well whether it was a practical thing of, if they don't die and they get trapped in the water, then it means that they can't be loaded off the map and it creates some glitch. And it was just a solution to just be like, well, they can drown and then that'll get rid of them.
That ends it.
It's something like that.
Probably.
Like it might have been, or, likely they were just like, lols.
Yeah. The developers are all a bunch of sociopaths.
Yeah. I think, yeah. Let's not throw any accusations out there, but
all game developers are sociopaths.
All right, on to our second section, the treasure section. I guess I can go first on this one. And I obviously, most of the experiences that I'm talking about, I want to treasure. But the one I guess that I will preserve the memory of beyond all others is my experience of Half-Life 2 and beating that weird crawler thing. Because I think one element of it is just obviously the sense of achievement that I got after doing it. And it didn't feel hollow because it then unlocked this narrative, like next part of the narrative, which I was really invested in and keyed into. So it was like, it was a real rush of just pure happiness and contentment. So that's on one thing. But also, I guess there's something about just the, it taught me something about myself and perseverance that I could do it.
Completely. That's a great story. And it's nice that your treasured game is from one of the more negative episodes where we're talking about the things about games we don't like.
Yeah, I reversed it. Yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely, because that could have been a story where you got so frustrated with that game you never finished it. And then for years to come, people are like, oh, did you play Half-Life 2? And you have to go, well, I did, but I got stuck on a bit and I couldn't do it. But you made it significantly harder for yourself by accident and then overcame it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that speaks to the wonders of the medium of computer games as well, that it's like we all experience the same thing, but not the same thing. And yeah, I like that element to it. Also, what you were saying there teases a little bit about what my tuck answer is going to be.
Ooh.
So we'll see. We'll come back to that one.
Okay, on to my treasure.
Yeah.
So the gaming memory I would preserve is from the last episode where you asked a question about cars in games, and I chose the forklift truck from Shenmue. And I just memories of playing that game I hold very, very dear. You also mentioned Shenmue 2 in your response, which I guess you played without having played the first one, which is crazy.
It came with the DVD that recapped the plot points of the first one.
Oh, that's quite good because it's quite cinematic. The first one, anyway.
Yeah. I think the film might have been 45 minutes, an hour, or something. Yeah, it was great.
But Shenmue 2 was.
Stick that in the show notes if there's a YouTube of it. Sorry.
Yeah, I definitely. Yeah, I will. Yeah. That's going in. But that Shenmue 2 I also played, but it wasn't as good, and it kind of lost some of the because it moved to Hong Kong or in part of Hong Kong, and they tried to up the scale of it. It lost a lot of the kind of charm, I think, of the first Shenmue. But yeah, the original one was an absolute masterpiece, and it had a really good way of making you feel very cozy, I think, especially when you're walking around this little town. It's like a bit drizzly and rainy, and you know everywhere's quite safe. There's fighting and stuff in the game, but your hometown is a relatively safe and kind of nice place. And like, you know, it gets to the evening, and then you go to a little ramen restaurant, and then you talk to the owners of the restaurant, usually about how your father was murdered in front of you. But other than that, it's very cozy and lovely. And I've had a thing recently where I sort of got quite interested in the idea of relaxing games or playing games to relax. But I don't think I've ever really managed it to play a game that really relaxes me. But I feel
even like Power Wash Simulator, I know that you spoke to me about that being something that you turned into monotony and anxiety.
Exactly. Yeah, basically, House Flipper and stuff like that. Those games, it's like they actually can become an exercise in anxiety and kind of cleanliness, and so it's not worked. But I do feel like I saw Shenmue is on Steam now. I thought I could go, but I think that'd be relaxing to play. Also, maybe that's a future item or bonus episode. You and me playing Shenmue together. Going on a little cozy jaunt.
Couch co-op. Yeah. On Shenmue.
Yeah. That's quite a long one. Sorry.
No, it's all good. And then, so the last question, breaching through the walls in a massive dump truck, is what game did you forget to mention that you would sneak into this series as part of an answer to one of the questions?
Okay, so my one was in answer to the addiction question again, and games you did play well beyond the point they were fun, and played a bit compulsively. And mine was Call of Duty World at War on the Xbox 360, which I think was a really good game, if you like the Call of Duty games.
Yeah, that was the one before Modern Warfare, wasn't it? It was like World War II one.
Yeah, that's it. I think it was the first one that had the Nazi zombies in.
Oh, like the co-op mode. Game.
Yeah, that's it. But it was the multiplayer mode, as is often the case with, the most toxic elements of video games. And it was more to do with, I think, where I was in my life at the time. And it was after, so as you know, obviously, but after uni, I went traveling for a little bit. And that's where I met Hannah, my partner. And then we had a lovely time in Australia, but then came home with no money and no jobs and sort of no prospects. That happens to a lot of people. You have this kind of before your life starts kind of time. And I think we were just really keen to, get our lives going and be a couple, this new couple and do those sorts of things. But we had to move in with my parents just for financial reasons for a little while. And I didn't have a job. And it was a bit of a bleak period of time. And Han got a job immediately and was just off out the house. And so I did get a job, but as like working for the NHS, scanning medical records. But I had to wait for my check, whatever it's called, DBS check, to go through. So I had like 8 weeks that took, and I just was at home.
And no guilt about having to job hunt or anything. So
no, exactly. Well,
just
initially,
literally whiling away the hours. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think so. The thing that I was pursuing in that game was, the levels that you go up.
Yeah.
When you play those games, it was like I wanted to get to the top level, which is like it's futile. It's insane because it feels like the amount of XP you need for each level goes up so exponentially. In the end, it's like you need to be playing this game for 24 hours just to go up a level.
Yeah.
And
what they do now as well is that they do like season passes so that it just resets constantly, doesn't it? It's like, oh man.
Yeah. All your dopamine's gone. Now you need to play us again to get it all back again. Yeah, it was exactly that. And it wasn't as complex as that back then. But I was again, who's it for? What was the point? But I do think there must be, pop psychology hat on, something about not feeling like I was contributing or doing anything worthwhile. And in my head, it was like, that
I can feel this green bar.
Yeah, exactly. I think.
Did you get there? Like, did you max out, or
I think I got higher than I would.
Employment rescued you.
Yeah, exactly. I think I got. I think it was like I was trying to get to 100, and I got to like 78 or something. Right, an insanely high, stupidly high number. But it becomes so monotonous in the end. It's just the same maps over. It's a good game, but same maps, same guns, all that sort of stuff over and over again. Yeah. So that's my tuck/truck. What's your one, buddy?
Mine's going to go negative as well. In that, the thing that I forgot to mention, and I'm going to truck into the series at the last minute, is a game that I found frustrating. And this will hopefully tie nicely into the Other People Exist Too section where we hear from listeners, because both your answer about sort of gaps in gaming there, you were talking about before you played Call of Duty, there was a bit of a gap. And my answer here linked to my friend Matt. So he's just bought the Dark Souls trilogy, which is laughable knowing him and how long he takes on games, because he really, really like tries to absorb every moment of the thing. And I think they're so open that it's a potential hellscape trap that he's made for himself. He might enjoy it, but I think it's going to be a long journey. And my only experience playing those Dark Souls games is Bloodborne, which is made by the same developers, but isn't in that universe, like thematic universe, but it's the same mechanics that go behind it. And so they're very, very hardcore RPGs with lots of different approaches that you can take to solving them, sort of like puzzle solving games, but also resource management and lots of like trees of things that you can do, and not very heavy on tutorials. You can just go about it any way that you like. And I think the game is supposed to be about 30 hours long, and I spent maybe 8 hours and think I was maybe 5 minutes into the game. I honestly, I just couldn't. I was also playing it at a point where I had like a young daughter, and so I was sort of trying to sandwich these little sections in time. So I didn't have time to be like in inventories and reading things. I was just like, just let me hack and slash something. Yeah. And it just wasn't that game at all. And again, it's like, maybe I'll reach a point in my life where I have 50 hours to like read around it and play it through. But I know that it's not a flaw with that game. That's a very well received game. It was a flaw with me and my point in life with it, which is just I was trying to treat it like it was Dynasty Warriors or something, where it's just like sprinting at bad guys and throwing my sword around. But
I think that's what I thought those games were until I spoke to some other people and watched a few videos. I thought they were kind of relatively light. Yeah, but they're so hard. The learning curve and the difficulty steepness is insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
That you have to have such patience, I think, for those kind of games. And it feels like they might be genuinely designed for people in a different stage of life, like that you could imagine getting well into that as a teenager. Yeah. But I wonder now if there's no point in our lives where we could ever really not feel like we were frittering something. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know we're all haunted by that absolutely. A lot, that sensation, and it's probably too much, but probably we should just be enjoying ourselves. But I feel like a game that's that long and that difficult would always make me think, I could be reading a book or watching a film or playing any of the other hundreds of games on my Steam list or wherever that I haven't got to before.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I just got used to playing games like BioShock Infinite that I was so obsessed with showing you the story that they just like, you've died, but it's of no consequence, to crack on. Yeah. It doesn't even make you load. It just like warps you back in. I love that. Yeah. That's great.
That's what's quite good about Shenmue is when you fail, because it's quite linear relatively, but when you fail a story point, just snap back 30 seconds or so and give it another go. And you have these quick time events where it's like, da-da-da-da-da, and you have to press a button quickly. And sometimes it's very frustrating when you don't do it in time, but just do it again in a minute.
Yeah. It's not like the bringing this back to frustration, that thing where it's like a minute long cutscene that you can't skip. Oh. And it's like, I will best you, and then just 10 seconds later you're dead. Yeah. Like, yeah. So bridging this into that. So that was the Trash Treasure Truck. Trash Treasure Truck. And bridging from that into questions from listeners, which we're going to call "Other People Exist Too." I might drop in a soundbite there, or I might just leave that. I had a message from Matt, who was thinking about gaming hiatuses, why they might have occurred, what brought you back, how had your relationship with games changed in between, and he was thinking about that in terms of looking back at teenage years, and thinking as well about, there's these games that you think you have really super strong memories of, and then you feel like you played them forever, but in reality, you think about it, you're like, well, it can only have been the summer holidays, which is like 5 weeks or whatever, and how what that reveals to us. And I was thinking about that because when you were talking about, and this will, I guess, force an answer into your mouth there about gaming hiatuses, but when you went traveling the first time, how you must have not been able to play games there, and then you went traveling again later with Han, and I know you sort of planned around that so you could continue to play games, but
that's an excellent. I didn't think about that actually, buddy, but that's really good. So the first time, because I went initially with 3 mates, who 2 of them are, Jack and Justin, who would play games together all the time, live for games. There was in Australia, in Sydney, where I first landed, their internet cafes, their gaming cafes were unbelievable. They were so good. The PCs that they had in these things are better than any gaming PC I've ever owned. I've had some monsters, but they could run anything, And my first couple of weeks, we spent loads of time in there playing Left 4 Dead 2 and Command and Conquer and a bunch of other stuff, and not experiencing the city and the social life at all. And I felt really sorry for our other friend, Jack, who because he doesn't really like games. And he was just sort of sat there looking at emails and going on Facebook and stuff, or probably wanting to go out and do things in the rest of the world.
Travel.
Yeah, exactly. The reason we were all there, basically. So I did manage to squeeze some in. But then, of course, when I met Hannah and started romancing, there was a dip in the amount of time we could play, except for I went off
the romance game.
Yeah, well, the greatest game of all. But when I went off with the guys and we did some like fruit picking and traveling around in a van and stuff like that, and I went back to Sydney to see Hannah, so it's just me and her there. But she had a job, so I was spending all my social time with her. But in the day when she went off to do a job, I kind of lived in that internet cafe again, and again didn't absorb any of the sights and fun things to do in Sydney, and just became good friends with these young Korean guys that were really good at Counter-Strike and played with them. But you're right, the second trip when me and Hannah we went to India and Southeast Asia and stuff like that, it was I didn't play anything really the whole time.
I thought you installed Grand Theft Auto on a laptop. I had memories of you doing that.
Oh,
and also ring the Grand Theft Auto bell. Ding, ding, ding. Managed to get it in the episode.
Well done. Also, buddy, you've remembered my life much better than I have. Not only did I install Grand Theft Auto, I also installed Twisted Metal too, which has also come up in another episode. And you lent me a Game Boy to play Pokemon on. So I also played Pokemon. Yeah. So actually there was loads of gaming. We had a little laptop. It was this really rubbish little laptop though. It could barely run GTA 3, which is I think what I played on there. But
right, yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right.
As well, I don't know that I've had any hiatuses.
Well, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're obsessed with games.
Yeah. What I have had is periods where I'm only playing sports games. And that's probably the closest that I've got. So mobile now as well means that I'm always playing something counts as a game. Like I went through a period of doing like this sort of crossword puzzle every day, not having a mobile game but doing that, and I was like, well, that's just playing a game really, isn't it? But there are periods in my life where I've ended up only playing either football games, or I got really into Madden for a bit, and that like having all these interesting idiosyncratic indie games, which is where my core interest in games lies, and not playing them because I've just been like, no, I just need something pleasing and rewarding. And I think those peaks have been at periods where either sort of high stress or low time, where I just want to sort of maximize enjoyment. And an absolute game changer is the Switch and the PlayStation 5 and their ability to just load you back in where you've been playing in a sort of power saver mode, whatever, because that's what's killer, is knowing you have 10 minutes and spending 5 minutes of it replaying a bit that you've just loaded in at. So
yeah, or long loading times in the past.
Yeah, but those periods are, I guess, around that time, as you say, in that sort of liminal space after university. I found myself playing a lot of Crover and nothing else.
What about when you became a dad, Rob? What was when your time is all gone? What were you going
Madden.
to then? Right.
Because with Madden, I could it saved the season mode thing I was playing. It would save per snap. So like American football is played one snap at a time, one down at a time, and every time someone is tackled or the ball goes out of play, the clock stops and they reset the whole thing. And so I could play, and it was saving it because it had some sort of manager mode thing. It was saving as I went. And it meant that if you play 5 minutes of it, that's satisfying and you're pushing on a bit forwards. Or if I had 45 minutes, I could play, a couple of games, and that was really rewarding. And I remember having Layla like strapped to me in a post asleep and just standing up and playing as well, which was another element to it. Like you could play it at odd angles and it didn't matter too much. Like it wasn't didn't affect the dexterity of it too much. But
I remember doing the same, having my daughter on my chest and waking her playing what's the first person shooter we played together a few times, the kind of Overwatch, playing Overwatch and the pad vibrating and waking her up and being like, well, I can't do that again. That's very annoying. I had one of my biggest gaming hiatuses when my daughter was born, but I broke it in like the most satisfying way possible. So I had a really long period of time where I just didn't feel like I could get to anything. I don't really have, I love sports games, but I don't really do that with them and have that. It sounds like it's a comfort to you as well, playing sports games as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So I probably had something on my phone, but I had a really long, I just can't get to anything. There's nothing that really suits what I want to do at the moment. And maybe just not the energy, or the brain power to do it. I think I'd probably revert to just watching TV or something like that for a while. But then I think she was about a year old and getting to the point where, Hank could take her off for a weekend. And Red Dead Redemption 2 was released. And I've had a thing that I like to do. I did for GTA 5 and I did for Red Dead 2, where I basically sort of said to my loved ones, you need to leave the property for a full weekend so that I can bury myself,
barricade yourself
in this game. Yeah, that's it. And really, which is something that we never do. When do we ever get a chance to do that?
Yeah.
And put, a genuine, 10, 20 hour whack into the beginnings of these games and immerse myself in them. And I did that with Red Dead 2. They went away, they went to Cardiff, and spent some time there. And it was such a lovely way to break that hiatus, but then such a bad game to have with a small child around. Because the missions are so long and they don't save.
There's no save points. Yeah.
And so you just feel. I remember one of the. There's a big spoiler in it, but one of the seminal missions, which really sort of has a heart-wrenching story point in it. In the middle of that, I tried to play through it while she was napping, and in the middle of it, she just woke up.
It's a high-pressure
and
game, isn't it?
And I was just like, I need to finish this bit. But she was, I had to go and tend to a crying baby instead. And then it was just like, well, that's that. I have to play it again later.
Yeah.
That was the end of it. So, yeah.
There you go. That's the definitive way to play it.
Yeah. With the stakes notched up to 11.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a great question, though.
Yeah. The next question that we had was from Joe and linked on from the previous episode. So just to recap, that's the sort of essential format of what we're doing, is trying to create a series of chained together questions.
Yeah.
And where people send things in, either as voice notes or just as written questions like Matt did, where there is sort of serendipity with the question that we've just had and something coming up, if it sparks an answer, we're going to try and link that in. So we're going to start the next series with Joe's question, which links directly from the car episode, and so I'm excited to get ahead to that and see what comes up.
Absolutely, yeah. I felt like I've been keen. I'm probably banging the drum too much when we've been doing this of ways to interact with listeners, and you kind of it's your idea really. Well, why can't some of the episodes be a question from them, and then we respond to that, because we are the format is a question and then we both give our answers and a bit of back and forth. And yeah, I think Joe's question fits really nicely. So look forward to doing that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it has been my favorite thing about recording this podcast is the conversations that it sparked, and how we can, even though, like, as you say, yourself and I were born within weeks of each other, have fairly similar backgrounds in terms of the consoles we had available to us, and yet had, really divergent experiences. And yeah, I think that's where we want to keep this at.
Definitely.
So yeah, please send us your stuff. Excited to hear it, and let's roll on with series 2.
Can't wait to get into series 2.
That's what I said. And that's where we end it. I was thinking about what we could use as the postscript for this episode. And when Tom had sent me the video of himself playing Valheim and the tower collapsing, he also then sent me a longer message that was about his sort of thoughts and memories that had come up in response to our questions. And it's a nice rambling collection of answers that cover a few of the different questions. But I thought it was a lovely way to try and leave it. And there are so many questions that we could leap on from this point. So I've sort of written them down. I'm going to try and bring them back in series 2 when I can, because there are so many jumping off points, and I'd love to be able to return to them and talk about MUDs, which every time I talk to Tom about computer games, he somehow ends up bringing these very niche genre back to me. And I know that he ended up at some point trying to create a Dragon Ball Z version of one of these games, which I'd love to hear his long anecdote about at some point. So need to trigger that memory in the next series or 2. But for now, this is the end of series 1, and we'll leave you with Tom.
I just listened to the episode about addiction and gaming, and like you both probably have just buried the games that I've spent far too long using gaming, but I was trying to think of a couple or some that I've played obsessively, but a couple come to mind. I think this is true of a lot of people with Championship Manager. When I first played that, I got so addicted to it. I just could not stop playing it. And it got to the point where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And I think actually my save game maybe have got deleted, and I was like, that's it. I'm just not gonna bother playing it ever again. And I never did. I never played it ever again. Because I knew I would just get addicted to it. And I used to remember going to university and sometimes going around to people's houses for like a pre-drinks or a party or something, and there'd be like 2 or 3 lads sat in the corner on computers playing Championship Manager, and I was like, wow, that could have been me. And it was weird how I saw that quite often. But now I've heard a lot of people getting quite obsessed with Championship Manager. But another one was probably when I was about, I want to say like 15 or 16. I played this text-based game. My friend Ash always found these quite obscure games. The first one we played was this drug game called Street Wars. And it was, an online multiplayer game, but all text-based. You basically dealt drugs. I think there was another one that came out after it, which was a bit wider spread, called Drug Wars, maybe, or Gang Wars. But this one was quite a niche one. It only had like quite a small community base, maybe like 100 people. but that we played that for quite a while, but it was a bit janky. But there was this game called Eternal City, which was sort of like based on Rome. You pick your warrior class, again text-based. So if you've never played a text-based game, you basically read the description, what it says on the screen, and then you type in left or right to go left or right or up or down. It will tell you like what's on the street, and then who's there, as in like other online characters, and you can look at those people, you can look around, you can speak to a shopkeeper. I think there were NPCs on it who you could interact with, but my friend and I were both warriors at the first, so we just spent our time trying to improve our character. All you did was just grind, like killing rats in the sewers, like opening them up, finding different jewels like amber, or and sometimes you would find a ruby, and it'd be much more expensive, and you could make money out of that, and then you could buy better armor, that sort of thing. And I remember we were saving up for Lorica hammers. If you don't know what that is, it's just a niche piece of armor. And we had to go to another city because we'd never left where we were based. I can't remember any of the names, unfortunately. But we had nowhere near the money. But I also had this thief character, and I got really good with her. The way you had to train her up was kind of by palming a coin. So you just like do it over and over again, and me and my friend would just stand in the side. Bearing in mind, there's no graphics; it's all text-based. Just us, just like palming these coins, just like making them disappear and reappear, and that would improve your skill. My thief character became really good, and I just used to steal like loads of money from patricians, which were NPCs. You'd have to target them in a crowd, and then like cut their purse strap, and then just take their money. Sometimes you'd get like 10, I think they were called dinars, and then, or like 200 dinars, and then I ended up making so much money. And this kind of rolls into the cheat episode as well, because you weren't supposed to swap items or money with your other characters, but I just gave loads of money to my warrior character so we could get these Lorica hammers, which we did. And we became like really good at it. But I've gone on a massive tangent there because I was just trying to explain the game. But I played this game non-stop, to the point where my mum was actually quite worried and was like, "You need to get out and like mow the lawn. Like, you need to stop playing that game." Because I was up at like 5 a.m. playing it. Got home from school, was playing it. It was just such obsessive behaviour. I just wanted to get better and better. But yeah, the moral of the story is they made it a pay-to-play game, and I think it was either something like £10 a month. It could have been more than that, actually. Maybe, no, it couldn't have been 30 quid a month. It must have been £10 a month, but I just wasn't willing to pay, and I knew it wasn't good for me, because it was, I obviously had a bit of an addiction to it. So I just gave all my money to a newbie, and then left it there. I have looked it up recently. I think it's still going. Look it up, Eternal City. But yeah, that's my 2 pence. Cheers, guys.
Memory complete. Uploading memory.
Thanks for listening to The Memory Game. If you would like to share a gaming memory with us, ask us a question, or send us your thoughts, you can contact us at memorygamepod@gmail.com or on Instagram @memorygamepod.